So we're up to chapter 7. Let's review. Chapter 1 introduced us to the notion of two souls. Chapter 2 introduced us, and chapter 1 gave us an overview of the soul of the body. Chapter 2 introduces us to the second soul, the nefesh ha'elikis, the godly soul, the divine soul. Chapter 3 takes us further, discussing the 10 faculties of the godly soul. Chapter 4 discusses the garments of the godly soul. Chapter 5 discusses the food, the nourishment of the godly soul. Chapter 6 discusses the 10 faculties and the garments of the animal soul, the animalistic soul, saying that it's from the three, and gave us a definition of the three completely impure klippos. However, says the Alter Rebbe at the beginning of chapter 7, there is another klippa. However, he says, nefesh hachiyunis habahamis shebi Yisrael, unlike the life forms and the activities and the thought, speech, and action that we described in the previous chapter that are completely, utterly impure and bound up in unholiness, there is a nefesh hachiyunis, the nefesh hachiyunis, the life force in the Jewish person, that is also called chiyunis and also called bahamis. Why is it called chiyunis? And why is it called bahamis? Chiyunis means life-giving, because its function is to give life and sustain the bodily function of the human being. But then it's also called bahamis because it functions only to fulfill the instinctive drives of the person. There's nothing elevated or particularly human about that soul. Not that it is the soul of an animal. It's a human soul, but it functions the same way that the soul of the animal functions. It sustains the body, and it pursues the wants, desires, needs, comfort, and pleasure of the body. So therefore, it's appropriately called animal or animalistic. We learned when we were doing the first chapter, we learned a lot of Eitz Chaim. For beginners like us, we learned a lot of Eitz Chaim. And there we learned that the souls are like an onion, layered like an onion. The innermost layer is the purest, most refined, loftiest, highest, and the outermost layer is the crassest, the most coarse, unrefined. And we learned that of the animal soul kingdom, the human animal soul is the core, and the life force that is actually in impure animals is the outermost layer. So there's a relationship, according to what I understood, according to the Eitz Chaim, there's a relationship between the animal soul of the human being and the animal soul of animals. There's an actual relationship. The instinct of the animal soul is the same across the board. It pursues the instinctive desires, wants, needs, and so on of the body. Where does that come from? It comes from klippa. It's called shemitzad ha-klippa. It's from the side of unholiness. Hamelubeshes bedam ha'adam kanal. It's clothed in the blood of the person, like we described in the first chapter, that the life force of the body, the soul that is the life force of the body, is clothed in the blood of the person and is carried throughout the body in the blood. As the blood circulates, the life force of the body is circulating, and that way it spreads from the soul, which is the soul of the body is situated at the heart. It's carried around and around throughout the entire body. That soul is from klippa. In the previous chapter, in chapter 6, we described that activities, certain forbidden activities, certain impure animals, certain forbidden fruits and vegetables, things that we are not allowed to engage with, things that we are not allowed to touch, things that we are not allowed to do, things we're not allowed to eat. Those activities, things, objects, people they are from the completely impure klippas, which is why we're not allowed to engage with them. However, there's another kind of klippa which we are learning about today called klippas noiga, and the soul of a Jewish body is from klippas noiga. That's not all. Also, v'nafshes behemus v'chayos v'oifos v'dagim tahirim u'mutarim ba'achila, the souls or the life force of animals, wild beasts, birds, and fish that are in the pure category that we are allowed to eat, their life force is from klippas noiga. The kiyum v'chayos kol hadoimim v'chol hatzeimeach hamutar ba'achila, the life force or the sustenance, the existence, the body, the energy that sustains the body of every mineral, everything in the inanimate kingdom. And that includes everything, because there is no mineral, there is no inanimate object in the world that is by its own very nature, by its own self, forbidden. Unless you used it for idolatry or unless you used it for some unholy purpose, the world's inanimate kingdom is all permitted. When it comes to the vegetable kingdom, however, it's not always all permitted, because there's such a thing as orla, there's such a thing as kilayim, which means fruits in the first 3 years, or species that are mixed together in a forbidden manner, you're not allowed to eat them, or certain grains that are reserved for kohanim to eat, a regular person is not allowed to eat it, or those kinds of things. Those kinds of things. If a person is going to, no, not the truma, not the kohen thing, just the orla and the kilayim, if a person were to eat them, he would be consuming an object whose soul and spirit is from the completely unholy impurity. However, anything that is not forbidden, anything that we are permitted to eat of the physical world, its sustenance is from unholiness, that's for sure. But what level of unholiness? Klippas noiga. V'chein kiyum v'chayos kol ha'maisa dibur machshava binyonei elam haza she'en b'hem tzad isur. So too, the life force or the energy that is invested in any deed, in any word spoken, and any thought considered regarding worldly affairs that are not forbidden in any way, shape, or form, loy sheiresh v'loy anaf, neither by a main prohibition of Torah or by any extension of the 365 prohibitions of Torah, ve'anpeihem de'iraisa v'drabanan, or any kind of extension, whether they be biblical or rabbinical in nature, any activity that is done in worldly affairs, if it's not forbidden, but it wasn't done for the sake of heaven, akshe'enon l'shem shamayim, they were performed for a human purpose. They weren't, and they're not wrong, they're not bad, they were just not performed for the sake of heaven. Rather, it was done only to fulfill the will of the body, the desire of the body, the lusting of the body, vafilu, and even. Okay, so that might be obvious. If somebody is pursuing pleasure for pleasure's sake, they could see how that might be considered unholy, even if the food or the source of pleasure is not treif. The Rebbe adds, even if the person is doing these activities for the health and well-being of his body, for the needs of his body, but his intention is not for the sake of heaven. In other words, he's doing it not in order to serve Hashem. He's not doing it in order to serve Hashem. He's doing it for a different purpose, to sustain himself, to support his own life, to live and be well physically. In those cases, loy adifa ma'aseh dibur machshava elu, machshava is elu. These thoughts, these words, and these actions are no better in terms of their source than nefesh achiyunis habahamis biatzma, than the animalistic soul of the human being itself, meaning it's rooted in klipa. V'hakoil kasher lakoil, everything that we listed until this point, nishba v'nimshach, is sustained and is drawn mimadrego hashenis shebe klipa Shebeklipas v'sitra achra, from the second group, the second category of klipa and sitra achra. Sitra achra means the opposition side. Shehi klipa revius, which is the fourth klipa, hanikreis klipas noiga, which is called klipas noiga. Let's pause for a second and ask an obvious question. Are you telling me that al pi Kabbalah, you have to always only serve, always only do anything that you're going to do for in the physical world, always has to be l'shem shamayim, has to be for the sake of heaven? Nothing can be done purely for out of need? That's what Kabbalah demands. That seems like a steep demand. What does halacha demand? So let's take a look and see what it is that the halacha demands. So we have here a quote from the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, where it says, Rabbi Yossi Eimer, Yehei mamin chavercha chavev alecha kishalach. Your friend's money should be as precious to you as your own. V'haskin atzmecha lilmod Torah. Prepare yourself to work hard to learn Torah she'enu yerushalach, because it's not an inheritance for you. You're not going to get it for free. V'chol ma'asecha yihu l'shem shamayim. And let all your actions be for the sake of heaven. All your actions should be for the sake of heaven. Says the experienced student of Torah. That's Pirkei Avos. That's beyond the letter of the law. Tell me, what is the law, the actual law? So let's bring the Rambam. Hilches Deis, hamanig atzmai al pi harefua. A person who conducts himself according to medical instructions. Im sam al libay sheyihya kol gufay ve'varav shleimim bilvad. If his only intention is that his body and his limbs should all be complete, so that he should be healthy, and that he should have children who can do his work for him, carry on the family business, take care of things that need to be taken care of, and help him in his own affairs. That is not a preferred way. Elo, rather, yasim al liba, he has to keep it in his mind, that his body should be complete, and he should be strong, healthy, so that his soul will be tranquil, ladas as Hashem, so he can focus on his relationship with Hashem. Because it's impossible to reach a deep understanding or achieve intellectual depth when he's starving or when he's ill, or when he has pain in one of his limbs. Rather, he has to keep it in his mind that he should have a son. The purpose of having children is not that they should carry on the family business only, but that they should be wise and great among the Jewish people. He should be a Talmud Chacham. Nimtza, the result of all this is, the halacha requires, a person who does this all his life is serving Hashem constantly. Even at a time when he's conducting his business affairs. Even when he's intimate with his spouse, he is serving Hashem constantly. Because on his mind in every activity is he's always trying to satisfy his physical needs so that he should be free to serve Hashem, so that he should be healthy and productive in his service of Hashem. Even at the time when the person is sleeping, if he's sleeping, as he lays himself down to sleep, he has in his mind that he's resting his body so he should be strong and he shouldn't be ill, because illness prevents him from serving Hashem. And even his sleep is in the service of Hashem. Regarding this, the Chachamim commanded us, and they said, all your activities should be for the sake of heaven. That is what Shlomo HaMelech said in his wisdom, in all your ways, in all of your ways, you shall know him, and he will make level your paths. He'll smooth out your paths. An interesting side note that the Rebbe points out, it could be from other places, but I know it only from the Chassidus, from the Rebbe, that there's a difference between these two statements. All your activities, all your actions should be for the sake of heaven. And b'chol derochecha de'ehu, you shall know him in all your ways. There are two different levels. Level number one is to do things l'shem shamayim. Right now, I'm doing this activity, and it is a bodily need, and I'm taking care of it. Why? So that later I should be able to serve Hashem. That's what the Rambam described here. There's a deeper level, a higher level, and that is b'chol derochecha de'ehu, to experience a connection to Hashem through all of your activities. And the difference is in the mindset. Why does a person lay down to sleep? Because Hashem commanded that a person has to sleep. So I sleep only because Hashem commanded it, not because I'm tired. That's the higher level. The beginner's level, which is where we do most of our work, is my body is tired and I have to sleep. I'm going to sleep now because I need energy to serve Hashem in the morning. See the difference? It's a subtle difference, but that's the difference between v'chol masacha yihiyu l'shem shamayim. All your actions should be for the sake of your avodas Hashem later, and the other level of b'chol derochecha de'ehu, in the act itself, you should be acknowledging and experiencing your relationship with Hashem. There is more. The tour, Rabbi Yaakov ben Osher, Baal HaTurim, his father is the Rosh, famous codifier. Every Gemara has the Rosh printed in the back, because from the Gemara itself, it's hard to decipher what the law is. There's a lot of discussion in the Gemara, but it's hard to know what is the law. And so there is a generation of tzaddikim and gedolim whose primary projects were to clarify from the Gemara what the law is. The Rambam is one of them. His style is most unique because he abandoned the order of the Talmud and he created a more intuitive order, which was a huge step. And a lot of his colleagues and a lot of his fellow generation gedolim, they didn't want to abandon the order of the Talmud. Obviously, the order of the Talmud is sacred. It's as holy as the Talmud itself. So to walk away from the Talmud's order is very tricky. And the Rambam did it, and it was a huge controversy, and he got a lot of flack for it, and he had some, whatever. Anyway, so the Rosh is another one who organized, who published works, bringing out from the Gemara what the law is. Rabbeinu Asher, they call him the Rosh. So on every discussion of the Talmud, there is a commentary called the Rosh, where he clarifies the discussion and points out what is the bottom line, what is the law. He has a son called Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher Baal HaTurim, who mimicked, or he borrowed the style of Rambam, in that he used an intuitive order for the halachas. He really created the order of the Shulchan Aruch that we know today. It's his order. It's even his chapter numbers. Because Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher wrote relevant halacha. Rambam wrote halacha on everything. Every subject that Torah ever addresses, the Rambam wrote a work clarifying the halacha. The Baal HaTurim, Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher Baal HaTurim, only wrote about matters that are relevant in modern life. So there are 4 rows of halacha. A tur means a row. And there are 4 rows of halacha. There's Orach Chaim, day-to-day life of a Jew. There is Yoreh Deah, which is the same as what's permitted and what's forbidden in terms of our engagements, kosher food, relationships, and so on. There's a row called Chosh and Mishpat, which is the Jewish legal system, and there's a row called Even HaEzer, which is focused mainly on the legalities of Jewish married life. Rabbi Yaakov Baal HaTurim invented that structure. One of the major commentaries on the Baal HaTurim was a man called Rabbi Yosef Karo, who later wrote his own Shulchan Aruch. But the chapter numbers are exactly the same as the Baal HaTurim's chapter numbers. And since then, most Shulchan Aruchs, the chapter numbers are the same. The Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch uses the same chapter numbers discuss the same subject matter as the Baal HaTurim's Shulchan Aruch and Rabbi Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. This is the Shulchan Aruch we live by. This is our day-to-day life as a Jew in the modern world. The Baal HaTurim. So this here is a quote from the Baal HaTurim, from the first tour, from the first row, which is about a day-to-day life of a Jewish person in this modern world. And this is what he says: Hilches Seder Hayoim, the laws of the daily order, daily conduct. Says the Baal HaTurim, after a person has finished eating, you should immediately go back to learn, to study Torah. If it's impossible for him to return to his learning, without a little siesta, without a little afternoon nap, Yashin, he should sleep. He shouldn't extend his nap very long. We learn Amar Rabbi Aser Lishan B'Yom Yosem Mishinas Asus. Says we are forbidden to sleep more than the way a horse would sleep during the day. Kav v'chamo hishinas asus shitin nishme, 60 breaths. So a very short, maybe a half hour. A half-hour nap is the maximum that halacha will allow a person to nap during the daytime when he should be learning Torah, or he should be pursuing his livelihood. Abaya havenoim. I'll skip a little bit because it's a long section. Here. Even this little amount of sleeping, it should not be his intention to derive pleasure for his body, for the pleasure of his body, or the benefit of his body, even. His intention should be to strengthen his body for the service of Hashem. The same is true for anything that he benefits from this whole world. His intention should not be for his own benefit. Rather, it should be for the intention of serving Hashem. As it says, in every way that you travel, in all of your ways, you should acknowledge Hashem. You call Masach L'Shem Shamayim. The explanation of all your matters should be done for the sake of heaven, even those things that are permitted, like your eating and your drinking, and your exercising, and your sitting down, and your getting up, and your intimacies, and your conversations, and you taking care of your bodily needs. Should all be for the sake of serving your Creator, or it should be for the sake of, or it should be something that brings about the service of Hashem. How do you conduct your eating and drinking that it should be for the same Shemaim, for the sake of heaven? Obviously, we don't even have to mention that you shouldn't eat or drink things that are forbidden by the Torah. But even when you're eating and drinking something that's permitted, and you were hungry or thirsty at the time, if you ate or you drank in order to quench the thirst and hunger of your body, that's not the praiseworthy way. Only if you had in mind to complete or fulfill the needs of your body, and you ate in order that you should be alive. You ate the amount that you need in order to be healthy, so that you can then serve Hashem. Sitting and getting up, and you're dwelling, conducting your home affairs, and you're going on walks and exercising. How should that be done? So again, he says, it goes without saying that you shouldn't sit in the company of scoffers, people that waste their time on useless information. And that you shouldn't follow the path, or shouldn't stand in the company of sinners. And that you shouldn't go and follow the ways of the wicked. But that goes without saying. Obviously, you can't serve Hashem through that. That's the opposite of serving Hashem. Rather, Halacha requires more from us. What is that? Even if you're sitting in the right and straight and narrow, and you're standing in the company of tzaddikim and righteous people, and you walk by the advice of people whose intentions are pure and good for the sake of heaven, if he did it for his own benefit, in order that he should gain something that he is interested in, even if the person's interests are holy and good and pure, but it's his own interest, that's not the praiseworthy way. Elohim kain also l'shem shamayim. Only if he did it for the sake of heaven. Shchiva keitzad, sleeping, how is it done l'shem shamayim? Ein tzarich lemer b'zman sheyachal las b'atera b'mitzvahs im misgara b'shina la'aneg atzmai she'ein roi las his kain. Obviously, it goes without saying that at a time that you're obligated to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, if you waste away that time by sleeping to delight your own for the sake of your own desires, obviously it's inappropriate to do that. That goes without saying. Ella afila bizman shehu yiga, whatever. Even at a time when he is tired, v'tzarech lishan, and he needs to sleep, kedei lo nuach migiyaseh, in order to rest up from his exhaustion. Im asala hanoas gufa, if he did it for the benefit of his own body, ein zeh meshubach. That's not the praiseworthy way. Elohim kain niskavin lahashlam tzarchei gufay, unless his intention is to complete and fulfill the needs of his body in order sheyuchal lavid beira, in order that later he should be able to serve Hashem. Yitain shina li'einav, he allows his eyes to close and he should sleep. Ulagufay menucha, and he rests up his body letzerech haberios, for the sake of his health. V'shalei daite b'teira machmas ha'egia, so that his mind should not be spoilt when he's trying to learn Torah because of the tremendous exhaustion that his body is experiencing from all this hard work. Hashmish keitzad, intimacies, how do we do it l'shem shamayim? Ein tzarich leimar, we don't, it goes without saying. Shelo yaver aveira, that he shouldn't do something that Torah forbids, obviously. Ella, rather, but that's not all. Afilu be'oino ha'amura b'Torah, even in those moments when Torah requires a person to be intimate, ha'amura b'Torah imisha, with his spouse or her spouse, lahanas gufay, if he did it for the benefit of his body, for the pleasure that it brings, that's embarrassing. That's not praiseworthy. Even if he did it, he was intimate, or the parents were intimate in order they should have children who could care for them in their old age, or take his place in the business. That's not the best way. That's not praiseworthy. Rather, his intention should be that he should have children who will raise up to serve Hashem. Or his intention is that he's intimate or she's intimate in order to fulfill the obligation that Torah puts on a married person. And he goes about, or she goes about that work like a person that's paying off a debt due to his or her creator. How do we converse together in a manner that is l'shem shamayim? So obviously, again, it goes without saying, if a person is speaking lashon hara or a person is using foul language, it goes without saying that that's not in the service of Hashem. That's the opposite of the service of Hashem. Even to review words of chachamim, even reviewing the words of the chachamim, if it has to be done with the intention of serving Hashem, or it should be done with the intention that it should bring about the service of Hashem. Bottom line. A person needs to pay attention, and he needs to measure all of his deeds in the scales of his mind. If he sees that something will bring him to serve Hashem, he should do that. And if he sees that there's something that is not going to bring him to the service of Hashem, he shouldn't do it. Story. A Bacher once wrote to the Rebbe in a letter, asking, why can't I listen to non-Jewish music or ladies singing music? I find it delightful, I enjoy it, why can't I do it? And the Rebbe says, you'll be hard-pressed to find a rock-solid halachic argument about why non-Jewish music per se is forbidden. But that's not the question. The Rebbe says the question you should be asking is, will it increase your fear, your reverence, your respect for Hashem? the way, or the way my father rephrased that same teaching from the Rebbe, don't ask why shouldn't I, ask why should I. When it comes to any activity, the question is not why should I not engage in that activity. The question is why should I? I don't need a good reason not to engage in activities. I need a good reason to go and engage in activities. If it brings you to serve Hashem, if it's a part of the service of Hashem, then you do it. And if not, you don't do it. A person who has this characteristic, this character trait, he's developed that habit. Such a person finds himself serving Hashem at every moment, when he's sitting, when he's standing, when he's walking, when he's going, when he's in business, when he's home, when he's intimate, when he's schmoozing, always serving Hashem. It was through this habit that Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was able to stick up his little finger l'mayla b'shas misasei at the time of his passing, and he said, "Go loy v'yodu alefanecha." He declared before Hashem, it is clearly known before you, Hashem, shlei nehenesi mehem ela l'shem shamayim, that I have not benefited even from my own fingers, other than for the sake of heaven. And the halacha goes on and on. A person who does this, he's elevating, as we'll learn later in the Perek, he's elevating these activities to holiness. He's binding, he's connecting the klipas noiga, which we're going to learn about presently, to holiness. The person who is doing these things for any purpose other than serving Hashem, that activity is no better than the klipa itself. We're not talking about sinful. It goes without saying, sinful behavior is obviously rooted and attached to the worst klipa. Permitted behaviors that are done purely for the sake of that activity itself, or the human interest involved. If it's not for the sake of heaven, it's not holy. It remains klipa. What's the logic here? Klipa means a husk. Klipa means a shell. Klipa could be a curtain. Klipa could be a facade, a false front that gives you an untrue impression. Hashem created the world. Hashem's purpose is the purpose of the world. But Klipa's job is to create the impression that the world exists on its own for a purpose other than what Hashem has in mind. That's false, that's fake, it's not true. But that's the job of Klipa. It creates that facade, it creates that idea, that illusion. When you eat a cookie, the cookie itself does not declare Hashem created me for the sake of bringing holiness into the world. The cookie itself simply says, I am a cookie, eat me because I'm delicious. The body says, I want the cookie because it's delicious. There is no appearance of godliness in that whole interaction. The only option, the only possibility for a holy expression in the act of eating a cookie is if the person eating the cookie has it in his mind, in his consciousness, that the purpose of this activity, the reason I'm eating this cookie, is so that I could serve Hashem, or in celebration of the Yom Tov, or to honor Shabbos. Only then is the holiness, the sacredness, the godliness that's inside the cookie, that's inside the activity, revealed and shown. The truth of the cookie is revealed when a person eats it for the sake of heaven. Otherwise, it's no greater, it's no better than the klipa itself. I apologize for the behavior of my camera. Let's continue then in the Tanya. V'hakoil kasher lakoil All of this, Nishba v'Nimshach, comes from the Madrego Hashenis, the second category of Klippa and Sitra Achara, which is called Klippas Noiga, the fourth Klippa called Klippas Noiga. Where do we see this language come from? Where did we get the word Noiga from? So we learned in the story of the vision of ChabadCLE when he saw Hashem's chariot with all the angels around and so on and so forth. We learned that surrounding all of the holiness were four things. Va'ira, and I looked. Vihine, and I beheld. Ruach se'ora, a stormy wind. Ba'aminat Safin, coming from the north. Onon Godol, a great cloud. Ve'esh mislakachas, and a flashing fire. Ve'noiga loi saviv, and a light all around it. So the first three items, the stormy wind, the huge cloud, and the flashing fire, those are the three completely impure klippas. The Baalei HaKabbalah tell us this. The three completely impure klippas, which have no good expressed in them at all. But around them is noiga. Around them is a little light, a little luminescence. What is that? That's a fourth layer of klippa, which the Alter Rebbe will explain to us its function presently. Sheba olam hazeh hanikra olam ha'asiyah. In this world, which is called the world of action, ruboy kekuloi ra. The majority of this world is evil. Rak me'at toiv me'oirav b'toicha. It's just that a small amount of goodness is intermingled within the klippa that sustains this world. You'll remember in the first chapter, we described that those people, all the Jewish people, but also some of the nations of the world, they have innate good character traits. Where the innate good character traits come from if their life is sustained by unholiness, because there's this fourth category of unholiness called klippas noiga, which is a mixture of good and evil. It has goodness naturally inside of it mixed in. And that's why compassion and kindness are natural, innate to these people. It doesn't only come from their divine soul, from their godly soul. It comes also from the natural soul, the elemental soul, the life force of the body. Commission is Barleil, this was explained earlier. The purpose, the function of this new category of klippa that we're learning about is to stand as the intermediary between shalish klippas hatmeis legamre, between the three completely impure klippas, uvein bechinas madregas hakadusha, and holiness. Klippa and holiness are polar opposites. Holiness is always batel to Hashem. For a definition of batel, please see 2 weeks ago class, the class from 2 weeks ago. And unholiness is always rejecting the kingdom, the kingship, the rulership, the dominion of Hashem. They're polar opposites. They cannot get along. They cannot coexist unless Hashem provides a bridge, an intermediary between them, and that is klippas noiga. Klippas noiga is, on the one hand, the same kind of garment. It covers over. It allows for the illusion that the world exists on its own. It allows for the illusion that that existence is possible other than from Hashem. But at the same time, it's noiga. It has some holiness shining in it. So it's related to both. It has a kinship with both the klippa and the kedusha, the holiness and the unholiness. It has a kinship with the unholiness in that it is a garment, and it is the facilitator of the illusion of like we've been saying, isness, the possibility of existing without the help of Hashem. In that manner, it has a certain kinship, a certain relationship with unholiness. On the other hand, it has the holy light of Hashem shining in it. And in that aspect, it has a relationship with holiness. Therefore, it finds itself in between. And therefore, sometimes this klipas noiga can be pulled and drawn to become included in the three completely impure klipos. We will look at that next week, God willing. And sometimes it's able to be elevated and brought into the realm of holiness. The Hainu, that means, when does that happen? What happens to the klipas noiga when it is elevated and brought into the realm of holiness? The Hainu that means that when the light of holiness that is absorbed, that's mixed into the klipas noiga, becomes sifted out, separated from the unholiness, separated from the facade, and is allowed to prevail over it, then it can ascend and become absorbed in holiness. A technical matter about this klipas noiga. The Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson of the Tanya, explains, I'm sure other people explain this, but this is the current source that we have, that klipas noiga exists on every level of creation. Not only on the level of this physical world, which is mostly evil, but at every level of the world, there has to be klipa. And klipa in Chassidus is equivalent to ra. The husk, the shell, the facilitator of the illusion that something other than Hashem could exist, that's called klipa. And in Chassidus, that is equated with evil. What is evil in the terminology, in the world view of Chassidus? Evil is the illusion that something other than Hashem really exists. The truth is that Hashem alone exists, and anything else that exists, anything else that is in a state of being, is only as an extension and only for the sake of the purpose of Hashem. Anything that gives the opposite illusion, anything that gives the opposite impression, is called klipa and is on the opposition team, the team that Hasidus calls evil. Many people, Jews included, have the impression that evil means gore and blood and disgusting and abhorrent and abominable. Hasidus comes and says, anything that's not in the service of Hashem is in the camp of evil. Why? Because it feeds into the illusion that something other than Hashem exists. It doesn't have to be abominable, and it doesn't have to be blood and gore, and it doesn't have to be immorality, and it doesn't have to be something sordid. Pure and simple. It's not for the sake of Hashem. It's not on the side of Kedusha. This illusion has to, this illusory curtain has to exist at every level of existence. As soon as something other than Hashem comes into being, that illusion begins. So I have the text here in front of us. It's not translated yet. I will read and translate for you just to give us a taste of this teaching. It's long, it's complex, but it'll certainly augment and assist us in our understanding of the whole concept of klipas noiga and klipa throughout all of the worlds. So let's just read. Whatever we'll get from it, we'll get. We won't come back to it next week. The source for it is from the holy book of the Tzemach Tzedek called Oir HaTorah Bereshis, volume 3, beginning on page 600. We have to understand how is it possible that there could be a klipa in the realm of Atzilus, which is what the Tzemach Tzedek was discussing in the previous paragraph. How could there be klipa in Atzilus? Since we're talking about the realm of Atzilus, what does it mean? Atzilus bechinas alikus mamish. The realm of Atzilus is existence but pure godliness, meaning bechinas bitul ein sof baruch hu, absolute nullification, absolute abdication, self-abdication, abnegation, and devotion and transparency to the infinite light of Hashem Himself. That's why that realm is called Atzilus, meaning nearness, closeness to the source. It's pure godliness. How could there be unholiness? How could there be evil there? How could there be klipa there? The answer is Kihinei Nizkar B'Sifrei HaKabbalah. It's mentioned in the holy books. Sheklipa is the Atzilus Hem Kulei Toiv. That the husks, the garments of Atzilus, that are also called klipa, they are completely good. It's only goodness in it. But as the evolution of the creation continues, the garments, the klippas, become more and more mixed. Evil becomes more and more mixed in. So at the level of Atzilus, the garments are completely good, but there are garments, there is klipa, there has to be. The world exists as a soul in a body, the light inside of a vessel. The vessel means there has to be klipa. I think. Udebriya, I'm pointing to the words. It's hard to follow when it's not organized in a row. Udebriya, roiv tuvoi umiutayra. Rubai toiv umiutayra. The garments of the realm of Bria, which is the second to top, there is some evil in there, but most of it is good. The Yetzira, Chetzi toiv v'chetzi ra. The third level, remember I don't remember which chapter it was, we mentioned there are four basic layers in existence. Obviously, there are innumerable actual levels, but all the levels are basically grouped into four general categories: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. So Atzilus, the garments, the klipa of Atzilus is completely good. The garment of Bria has some evil in it, but it's mostly good. The garments, the klipa of Yetzira is 50-50. And the garment of Asiya is mostly bad. Yeah, the Asiya ruboy ra. On the level of Asiya, it's mostly bad. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is referring to in our chapter. The Alter Rebbe says this physical world, which is mostly bad, since it is sustained by the klipa, even the klipas noiga. Obviously, we're talking about klipas noiga here, where it's a mix of good and evil. The three totally, completely impure klipas, they have no good in them whatsoever. Here we're talking about klipas noiga. I believe we're talking about klipas noiga, and this is what the Alter Rebbe is referring to. He says this physical world is mostly bad because it's sustained by the klipa, which at this level, the level of Asiya, the klipa is mostly bad. For the remaining time of the class, until 12 o'clock, I'm going to read and translate from this teaching, and every line that we read will benefit our understanding, will augment our understanding of the subject matter. We're not going to get to the conclusion, so please don't look forward to a conclusion. We're just gathering data on the subject, and it'll help us tremendously. Every detail that we know helps to put the whole picture in order. So I'm just going to keep on going, and then at 12 o'clock we'll pause, and those who have to leave will go, and those who want to ask questions and follow up will be welcome to do so. In Eitz Chaim it says, but it says, in the realm of Atzilus, the effusion of holiness is greater than the effusion of Tuma, of impurity, and that the two of them are completely not mixed with each other. Holiness and impurity. Holiness and impurity, they're not blended together in the realm of Atzilus, but there is unholiness at that level. There is the garment at that level. At the realm of Bria, holiness is more, holiness overwhelms the unholiness, the impure, but they are blended together. In the realm of Yetzirah, it's half and half. They're also blended together. The Asiya of Klipa, this realm of existence from the Klipa side is much, much more. It overwhelms the Asiya of the pure side. And and they're also blended together, mixed together. There is no object in the entire realm of Asiya that is not a blend of good and evil. Kedusha v'klipa, holiness, and the husk, me'uravim yachad mamish, they're literally mixed together where you can't tell where one begins and the other one ends. The impurity of Atzilus is called the husk, klipa of the husk of Atzilus, which is pure. The pure husk of Atzilus. V'omnam ein taruvis tevarash yesh. V'omnam ein hataruvis tevarash yesh b'gimel elam izbiyah. Ein echaz v'shalom b'yud sfiris. Reminder, says the Tzemach Tzedek. When we say that goodness is mixed with evil, we are not talking about the actual divine light, the 10 emanations, the 10 spheres that exist as the core battery pack of every single level, every single layer of creation that we discussed at the end of last week's class. The very last commentary that the Alter Rebbe gave us in chapter 6 is, let's not forget that at every level there are the 10 emanations of Hashem, and they are pure and they remain pure, and evil doesn't touch them, and klipa doesn't touch them, and unholiness is not mixed into them at all. The Eitz Chaim is telling us that the mixture is in the worlds themselves, but not at all in the 10 spheres that are at the core of each world. The body, the chambers, the vessels of each world, that's where the mixtures happen of good and evil, where there is there's goodness shining in the world, and there's also unholiness shining in the world. From here we could take out hipuch mashikosov kan shari hamuvan me'etz chaim hu da klipas atzma leishach b'hem lema ruban toiv kihim tuma mamish. One might argue that from the Eitz Chaim you can't call the klipa a mixture because the klipa itself is called utterly impure. Rather, when we say that there is goodness in the klipa, or that the klipa is half goodness and half evil, it all depends on the holiness of the level that klipa finds itself on, the holiness of the world in which the klipa finds itself. The olam is biya im haklipa shabatzilus olam de kedusha meruba al hatuma ve'enan me'uravim ach bebriya him merubim gamkein ach me'uravim. In Atzilus, holiness overwhelms the impurity, and they are not mixed at all. That's the state of affairs in the realm of Atzilus. In the realm of Bria, holiness overpowers the unholiness, but they are mixed together. That's the state of affairs in Bria. That means, it seems that you cannot say about the klipa of Bria itself that it is mostly good. Only when the klipa is mixed with the goodness as a result of eating from the tree of knowledge. When Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, good and evil got mixed at every level, except Atzilus. So in the realm of Bria, there exists the core of holiness, and there is the core of unholiness, and the unholiness and the holiness at a certain point are mixed together, and in that mixture, holiness is overpowering and the unholiness is quelched, but it is mixed, and so on it goes. And the Tzemach Tzedek continues to analyze this subject, but we're going to stop here for now. Thank you very much for joining. We will now end the class.